Good morning, watchers. Welcome to Brother Sal's Sunday gathering at the storehouse. So happy to be here once again. So pleased that you're here listening. Tony is with me again today, and I'm sure he's going to have some very interesting things to say about what's happened this past week. So I want to welcome him to the show. Good morning, Tony. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Dad. Coming to you maybe for the last time here from Budapest, Hungary. I should be back in California next week. And I tell you, there's so much going on that, I find it so misleading if people don't have the context that I tried to talk about last week. So I encourage people to listen to some of the things we've been saying the last few weeks, if you really want to get up to speed on what I feel is the true nature of what's going on. But this week, there's so many things in the news, and I have so many articles here that I just will see how many I can get through, and so many headlines that I find to be, practically outrageous. So let's see. Maybe the first one that is sort of important. Well, they're all important. Of course, the San Bernardino shooting. I guess maybe since that's at the top of all the headlines, we could talk for just a minute about that. The first headlines this week talked about, is it possibly linked to terrorism? And now, conveniently, we have Islamic State broadcast says followers of the group carried out California's attacks. This is from a Reuters article on Saturday, I believe. And it's saying that on a let's see if I can find the words here. Islamic State said in an online radio broadcast on Saturday that 2 followers of the Islamist militant group had carried out Wednesday's attack on a social services agency party in California, where 14 people were killed. Apparently the authorities are still questioning that, since another article says that these people were not on any lists of terrorist radar. And in fact, what I find interesting in this other article about it, which is from the 3rd of December, titled San Bernardino Mass Shooting, FBI Probes Possible Terror Ties. The byline says, Saeed Farouk may have become radicalized, CNN sources say, by Dylan Stableford. Now, anything coming out of CNN, of course, is straight propaganda. All of this is propaganda. There is no journalism in the world, and that's why if you don't have some sort of context to fit all of these articles into, well, you're going to be taken by surprise. I mean, what did it say in the scriptures? Jesus told the Jews that even the very elect would be fooled if that were possible. So, what does that tell you? That even the people who know what to look for are going to be fooled by the illusion created for us. And that's why I think last week's show was called Wag the Dog, because this is what's really going on in the world and has been all of my life. But certainly as we come down to the time that's been predicted for the Third World War, and the powers that are moving their pawns into place, this is what we're facing, is absolute wag the dog. So, what happened in San Bernardino? Obviously, a lot of people were killed. I haven't seen any real journalism yet on if any of the people were killed might have been targets for some other reason. Remember, when you have all this wag the dog world, you're going to have a few whistleblowers. You're going to have a few people who might happen to know what's going on or be threatening the overall illusion by lifting the curtain on the Wizard of Oz and showing that he's just a feeble and frail old man with a big speaker system and a lot of tricky technology. And so anyone that threatens that I will be killed nowadays. They will not be heard. The only reason that we're heard, Dad, is because we're so far under the radar. What the last week's show got 75 views. I find it, unfortunate for the people in the world that might actually be able to wake up and watch this the way we've been watching it for so many years with some sort of insight and context. But that's probably the only reason we're still on the air, is that nobody really listens to us. So that's good. Maybe at some point this will have a chance of illuminating things for people. So, who was killed and why, I don't know, but the facts as reported by our wag the dog journalism are always quite suspect in my view. These, they point out that this man, Saeed Farouk, 28 years old, worked for the health agency at San Bernardino and was at a company party before he left and came back shooting everybody up. And then, of course, one of the things they say in here was that it doesn't look like this was something that he just decided to do because he got in a apparent conflict in the party. And so he ran home and got 1,600 rounds of ammunition and all these pipe bombs and such. It would seem that this was something he and his new wife were planning for some time. So you have to ask, what was going through these guys' minds? Well, of course, radical Islam. What I found interesting about this first article from December 3rd, San Bernardino mass shooting, FBI probes possible terror ties. Saeed Farouk may have become radicalized, CNN sources say. Dylan Stableford, the mouthpiece putting this out, is at the bottom of all these articles are like 500 word. Nothing. No journalism, no insight, just hype propaganda. But what I find interesting is at the end of the article it says members of two mosques where Farouk reportedly worshipped told NBC News he was, quote, a mild-mannered and devout Muslim who came to prayers on his lunch break. Also quoting, we never saw him raise his voice. Nazim Ali, who prayed alongside Farouk at Dar al-Ulum al-Islamiyah in San Bernardino, told the network, quote, we never saw him curse at anyone, disrespect anyone. He was always a very nice guy. A former co-worker said Farouk was well-liked and rarely discussed religion at work. Quote, he never struck me as a fanatic, Griselda Reisinger told the Los Angeles Times. He never struck me as suspicious. Farhan Khan, Farouk's brother-in-law, said he last saw him about a week ago and cannot fathom, nice reporting here, what motivated his brother to carry out the deadliest mass shooting in the U.S. since Sandy Hook. I have no idea why he would do that, Khan said at a news conference in Anaheim late Thursday. I am in shock. So interesting that, these people that went on a shooting spree, these weren't indoctrinated as we'd expect, people that were militant in their ways or that everyone could tell, right? I mean, these Islamic State, they're calling for blood constantly. The whole propaganda of Al-Qaeda, always calling for the blood of the infidel. To please Allah, you gotta go kill somebody. And so apparently this guy didn't have that sort of attitude, which is why CNN says he suddenly became radicalized. So quite a stretch for me to imagine a person that's well-liked, mild-mannered, other people see him as a devout Muslim, and all along what he's really planning is to go kill innocent people in cold blood. Because, of course, Muslims don't do that any more than Christians go shoot abortion doctors. That's not Christian. Christians are supposed to love their enemies and love the people that persecute them. That's what a Christian is. And so a Muslim has the same sort of calling. And to that effect, there's other articles about the Muslims in America now having to fear the backlash of this sort of thing. I find that in two of these articles, Dad, they compare it to Sandy Hook. Now, almost everyone, including the school investigator that we talked about many weeks or months ago, that investigated the Sandy Hook supposed shootings. Of course, nobody died at Sandy Hook. That was not a massacre. That was a hoax, and that's easy to find out that was a hoax. Funny that our news correspondents and journalists don't even question that. They simply, in two of the articles I've read this week, they simply state that this was the deadliest shooting in the U.S. since the Sandy Hook massacre, which everyone, including this quite qualified retired school security man, investigated himself, and he's one of the people that blew the whistle on the fact that this was not what it claimed to be, and that apparently no children actually died. Nobody seems to have died there. It seemed to have been a complete hoax that went on in Sandy Hook, but they're presenting it to us. They're using it now as something that was a massacre. So it stinks of false flag. It absolutely stinks, and of course these people were killed. It's funny how they're never able to just wound these people and bring them to justice, find out who they work for. You know, all the things you'd expect from the most high-tech, technologically advanced power that the world's ever known. And the only people with the kind of technology that we have, again, the Islamic State doesn't have this technology for reconnaissance, for eavesdropping, for communications, for smuggling weapons, all this kind of thing. You know, America has this technology, but Islamic State doesn't have this technology. But they're the ones that get to keep terrorizing, and our journalists put it down to this, what appears to be a devout Muslim, mild-mannered, liked by his employees, doesn't talk about religion at work, but he may have become radicalized. And so, anyway, I think the San Bernardino shooting, in my context, is something to stimulate this war that has to come. And when is this war going to come? Well, what did I say in these last couple of weeks? What did I say last week, Dad? It's got to be 7 years or more until we see a 7-year covenant made with many. Probably one that's going to allow the state of Israel to rebuild the temple on Temple Mount. Until we see that, we're at least 7 years away. And we need to see this righteous king that's given a crown that's going to go forth conquering ISIS. So I see that we're still setting up the need for that. And so let me jump to an article now by, let's see, it's in the FP. I have no idea what that means. FP, December 3rd, 2015, by William Toby. And the title of this article is Iran Lied About Its Nuclear Program. What is the United States going to do about it? What I find is so important about this, again, you know, all of 500 words to tell us, you know, about what would appear to be one of the most important socio-political things, you know, in modern history, with the way they, you know, what, a year or so ago, this whole Iran deal, right? Wasn't that on on the television every single night and all the implications, and you had that war hawk lobbyist for AIPAC that became somewhat famous for his remarks on the alternative news on the internet, pointing out that false flags are how we get into wars, right? And an Iranian submarine could go down and not come up, and who would know why? And so anyway, that was already proposed quite openly by this AIPAC a-hole about how to get us into a war with Iran. And so I just want to read the final couple of paragraphs here in this article. It says the Iran deal will go forward. Sanctions will be lifted. The bedrock principle of safeguards work, a complete and correct declaration followed by IAEA verification, will be fractured, temporarily at least, with U.S. complicity. Why should future proliferators not invoke the Iran deal precedent under which the Iranians pretend to comply with their obligations and we pretend to believe them? Why even should Tehran take seriously all the administration's huffing and puffing about the importance of compliance? The July deal did not solve the Iran nuclear program. At best, it delayed it. In 10 to 15 years, the central provisions of the deal will fade away and Iran will be free to maintain unlimited inventories of centrifuges and low-enriched uranium, reducing the metric breakout time so cherished by the administration from 12 months to several days. Tehran's reluctance to comply with its obligation to provide a complete and correct declaration today is compelling, although not dispositive, evidence that it continues to harbor nuclear weapons ambitions, which it will return to in the future. The political fight over the Iran deal is over. It will be implemented. America and her allies, however, must join together quickly to prepare for the day in a decade or so when this question will again be upon us. So I believe this is already starting to set the time frame, as I tried to outline last week, that I say we're probably 8 or 10 years away from Armageddon. And there's many things to watch happen before that, the first of which will be the rise of this righteous king, this Muslim king, who will be given a crown of honor and will go forth conquering, I believe, ISIS. Then a 7-year deal will be struck with many people now as this king speaks for Islam, or at least for Sunni Islam, and they will allow Israel to build a temple on Temple Mount. Now that should infuriate Iran. So anyway, I feel all this stuff's being set up for us, and it's still years away. One of the other articles I found interesting that ties in with this, Dad, is this is from Reuters on Saturday by Dan Williams and Carolina Tegaris, and it's titled, Israel Trained Against Russian-Made Air Defense System in Greece. And this talks about, and I'll just read the first couple of paragraphs, because again, these are all these articles now are like 500 to 1,000 words. There's just nothing there. It's American-style journalism in which only wag the dog propaganda is put in our face with no actual questions being asked or answered. So this one says, Israel has quietly tested ways of defeating an advanced air defense system that Russia has deployed in the Middle East and that could limit Israel's ability to strike in Syria or Iran, military and diplomatic sources said. The sources said a Russian S-300 anti-aircraft system sold to Cyprus 18 years ago, but now located on the Greek island of Crete, had been activated during joint drills between the Greek and Israeli air forces in April to May this year. The activation allowed Israel's warplanes to test how the S-300's lock-on system works, gathering data on its powerful tracking radar, and how it might be blinded or bluffed. One defense source in the region said Greece had done so at the request of the United States, Israel's chief ally, on at least one occasion in the past year. It was unclear whether Israel had shared its findings with its allies. So this is now prepping us for the fact that they're testing the weapons to see what can be done and what can't be done in the way of being able to attack Syria and Iran from Israel's standpoint. And of course, that would be in protection now of their new Messiah, who's going to let them rebuild their temple. And as I say, which will make Iran quite furious. Okay, so here's another one. There's just, it's, Dad, there's so much misinformation right now that I can't repeat often enough that if you don't do a little historical study and find some context to fit this into, you really are going to just be driven like the waves of the sea by any wind that blows from any direction. They'll be able to just tell you whatever they want you to know. And I encourage people to watch that movie from many years ago with Dustin Hoffman and Robert De Niro called Wag the Dog. And it was essentially about the power they already had to create in the public's eyes anything they want, whether it be war or peace. They can do it without ever firing a shot. And again, show me all the troops. Show me this great force of the Islamic State. Show me all the fighting that's really going on. As I said last week, every time I see a picture of them, it's the same line of 10 or 15 people in perfectly clean black uniforms, carrying perfectly clean flags. None of those people look like they've ever done any fighting. At least the uniforms haven't been in any fighting. So they just must have this. I mean, these people who are, we're going to find out also this week that Russia's accusing Ankara and the leader Erdogan in Turkey and his family of profiting from the ISIS sale of oil. There's another article in which Turkey says he's got proof that Russia's profiting. So blah, 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 the propaganda flying to keep everybody chasing their tails. And then there's another article in which, might have been Kerry, somebody claims that, actually the oil sales don't amount to much economically. So I'm just wondering, where is ISIS getting this, the money to continue the fight against, Russia, America, France, all the, let's just forget Israel and Belgium and everybody else that's, Italy, everybody else that's contributing to this fight. But the fact that they're fighting the whole world, now we're told in at least one of our articles that, their oil sales don't amount to so much. And yet, man, these people have an unlimited, they must spend a fortune on brand new uniforms, because every time you see a picture of them, they're walking around in perfectly clean, brand new uniforms, like it's a stage play. And that's what it is, from my opinion. So this article, AFP, on Saturday, Baghdad calls on Ankara to immediately withdraw troops. So here's some more tension in the region that can lead to, this grand scale of fighting that we know is coming here in our roadmap to peace, the peace process, the great awakening, as it was called, right? The Sunni awakening, the Arab Spring, democracy and freedom, because that's what these people want over there. And this small band of radicals that can't even convince their own people to join them, because we also have articles where they're having to recruit children now. Right? This small band of radicals is threatening the peace and the freedom that otherwise these people want, and that America tried to bring them in Afghanistan and Iraq from 15 years ago. We built the largest military base in the world in Iraq. When you consider the investment America's made in this part of the region, and then to watch the Arab Spring tear it all apart. And as I say, Dad, we were presenting the Arab Spring as a false flag while it was happening, just like I was presenting uh, Libya blowing up his own oil pipeline as the end of Gaddafi's regime while it was happening, just like I was presenting ISIS as a false flag being raised up just to be this scourge that was predicted while it was a flag. Well, there was nothing. They weren't even reported yet to have 3,000 members. And I was saying we're not going to stop them because I could see what our propaganda was doing. Oh, we were being so overly cautious because, of course, it's okay that we invade Afghanistan and Iraq for 15 years and completely destroy these countries, but it's not okay that we stop the most radical cancer that we're claiming to be growing out of this. We got to be cautious. We got to stand down. We got to wait and see. And we just have watched it grow to this. And I was saying it from a year ago that that's exactly what was going to happen. So again, I invite people to listen to some of our commentaries, even though they might only have 70 or 80 views or 150 views or whatever. Go ahead and avail yourself of that information, and if you find better information and more accurate insight on the internet, I'd love to hear about it. So in this article now, again from AFP on Saturday, Baghdad calls on Ankara to immediately withdraw troops. Iraq calls on Turkey to immediately withdraw forces, including tanks and artillery it has deployed in the country's north without Baghdad's consent, the Premier's office said on Saturday. We have confirmation that Turkish forces, numbering about one armored regiment with a number of tanks and artillery, entered Iraqi territory, allegedly to train Iraqi groups, without a request or authorization from Iraqi federal authorities, it said. The deployment is considered a serious violation of Iraqi sovereignty. So this is just one more potential for disaster, which is what is coming, so everyone can know what we've been predicting. Disaster is what's coming, and it's coming all over the world. One of the other things I think is important to note this week, Dad, is the big fuss going on in Britain about them now. They got to start bombing ISIS. So, I mean, it's not enough that America's been dropping thousands of bombs for years without us seeing any evidence of what it's done. In fact, we read a few weeks back where one of our articles pointed out that ISIS hadn't been budged an inch. That's starting to change now. Now they're starting to talk about so many ISIS fighters being killed that they have to recruit children. So it's starting to, I believe that this is all leading to the fact that they can become even more vehement, what will be false flags in the West. They can start blowing up more things now in more countries in Western Europe and the United States and blaming ISIS because ISIS is becoming so desperate. And at some point, because now it's all talk about boots on the ground, sending troops over there. But as we pointed out, I think in the last couple of weeks, it's been said, I think by Ash Carter or some others, that only Sunni and Arab troops are going to get the sort of validation by the people around there. These people are not going to follow French and American and British troops because they know too well what kind of future we bring to that region. This is why we're setting the stage, I believe, for the rise of this little horn king, this white horse, this righteous king that will be given a crown of honor and will use it to go forth conquering. So in this article, we're just setting up Iraq still to have more conflict. But for as far as the people in the United States of America that are listening, I believe that it's only going to get worse in America. One of the articles here from Reuters from December 3rd by Ben Clayman says Muslim Americans fear demonization of Islam after mass shooting. And so that's quite obvious what that article is going to point out, that Muslim Americans fear their religion will be demonized and Islamophobia will spread, which of course is what's going to happen. That's why they're saying it in the headline of the article, because that's what the plan is. And right now they're giving us the cathartic vision, where even people in California are saying, hey, we're not going to hate our Muslim brothers because some bad apples try to spoil the whole bunch. But when it gets worse and uncontrollable, well, then it's not a matter of hating them. It's just simply a matter of self-protection now. We have to do something, like in the days of World War II, when we felt we had to round up all the Japanese and put them in camps. And so I think that sort of thing has to come again to create the type of world that's predicted, in which this scourge has to be universally fought against. The citizens of the world have to come together quite universally to try and rid the world of this scourge. And so we're not there yet. So this stuff is still coming to us. I kind of want to go over some of the other headlines that are always below these 500-word propaganda articles that I get over my Yahoo account. And they're recommended for me, it says, recommended for you. We went over these first couple, but these are just now the headlines of different articles, Dad. Russia bombs nearly 1,500 Syrian targets, oil fields, military. Russian Air Force has struck nearly 1,500 targets all over Syria over the past 9 days, the military said. Its bombers now flying under cover of strategic fighter jets following the downing of a plane by Turkey last week. So the downing of the plane not only brought the tensions with Turkey, which I also want to talk about, because I think that's a very important strategic piece to the long-term puzzle, where NATO and Russia can eventually, the seeds are being sown for that fight. But again, 1,500 targets and no video, no pictures, not even a cell phone from someone on the ground. Where are all these targets? And I mean, the bombs today are quite potent, aren't they? And the precision capabilities of the technology we have to send them right where we want them. 1,500 Syrian targets. I'm still waiting to see some journalism, some graphic, since we know right where everybody is, right where all the fighting's going on, right where all the strongholds are, where the recruiting's done. They show us this week again. I saw a picture of the line of Toyota trucks, which is probably the same picture they show over and over again. But, where is the evidence of where these targets are? Another headline of all these headlines here made for me or brought to me. Muslims react to New York Post's Muslim killers front page after San Bernardino shooting. How's that, Dad? Front page Muslim killers. Now, I haven't read the article because there's just too many today. There's just too many to read. But I find it highly suspect that one of the nation's most influential papers is going to put Muslim killers on the front page when, as I keep saying over and over and over again, there are no such thing as Muslim killers. If they're killers, they're not Muslims. If they're abortion doctor killers, they're not Christians. Why isn't that being pointed out? That these people are not Muslim, and therefore there's no reason to identify them as Muslims, but as people stealing the name of Islam, and that's what needs to be countered in the press, is to denounce them as not Muslim, and so that can't be by accident, this wag the dog propaganda world in which they control everything we see and read. Don't forget about 9/11, people. The planes, there were no planes. Planes do not fly into buildings. Never, ever, ever. The trade towers were built to withstand multiple impacts of passenger airliners larger than the ones that we supposedly were shown passing into them, as if those 6-inch steel members that hold those buildings up were made of paper. These airplanes are plastic-tipped aluminum projectiles. If they hit a telephone pole, their wings tear off or get sliced off, and yet the tips of the wings we were shown slicing through 6 inches of steel. So I don't know when people are going to get it, but that didn't happen. It did not happen. So whether you think you saw it or not, go watch the Roadrunner cartoon and watch how the Roadrunner runs right through the mountain and leaves even his feathers, leave an outline in the rock. Do we believe that that's possible? No, it's a cartoon. So, again, 1,500 Syrian targets. Where are these targets? What are we bombing? This is all wag the dog. Muslim killers don't exist. So, terrorists funded by who exist? Who's funding these terrorists? Well, we already know. ISIS was started by the CIA, funded by Saudi Arabia, and it's the Mossad whose slogan is through deceit, thou will do war. So, why is none of this brought up in our journalism? Why is the fact that the state of Israel that's hated by Iran is also hated by the Semitic Jews who denounce its Zionistic agenda as not from God? Why is everything in our Christianity relate to the state of Israel as God's people? God's people. You know why? Because you won't ever get another day on the air as a Christian preacher officially. You won't get any funding. You won't get anything but a hard time if you point out that these aren't God's people and this isn't God's doing, and the state of Israel always has been a terrorist organization funded to be a terrorist organization. So, that's the real truth of it. Now, here's another interesting article that ties into what I want to get back to, what's going on in Britain. And this one says, militant network behind Paris attack has links to people in Britain. Because remember, the Paris attacks we were shown was masterminded by another 28-year-old whose cousin left her all the information on her cell phone and just threw it in a garbage can. I mean, because that's what masterminds do. If you're going to mastermind terrorism against the most sophisticated, technologically advanced military in the world, well, yeah, you certainly wouldn't learn to at least, crush the cell phone under your foot first so that you didn't leave all the information to get back to you. And of course, all these people are conveniently killed, just like the San Bernardino couple. No chance that they could have been taken alive, so that we might have found something out about who are they talking to. Who's, let's get some evidence like we used to like in America. The idea that if we had the evidence, then we could rightfully go after whoever ordered them to do that. But no, everybody's conveniently killed. And again, I wonder, were these people, set up? I have no idea, because it just doesn't jibe that mild-mannered, devout Muslims suddenly go on a killing rampage and then are killed themselves in a police shootout. They don't even bother to blow themselves up to kill more people. They run from the police as if the whole thing was staged so that the police could kill them and blame them. I don't know. I'm just saying I would bet my life that we aren't getting the facts about the San Bernardino shooting. So now this one, the militant network behind the Paris attack has links to people in Britain. Now I think this is quite scary. This is something the Wall Street Journal reported on Friday, it says. And the reason I find this scary is because, of course, Britain's just made a big deal this past week about joining the bombing against ISIS. Now, is that what you do as a military? We wouldn't even let people investigate the rubbish from 9/11 so that we might get some details. And yet Britain's just going to announce what they're going to do. Why wouldn't you just go bomb them? Why would you announce that and increase the danger on your own people? All the people that need to know behind the scenes, in other words, your allies, the French military, the Israeli military, the American military, all the allies would know, okay, we're England and we're going to help, we're getting involved, but we don't want to announce it to the world to increase the danger to our own people, but in fact, that's just what they did. So I say, be very careful. I mean, I've been calling on these false flags to be happening in the rich countries of Europe. I've been saying that for months, that since the refugee crisis was announcing that that's what they were going to do. I said, France, Britain, Italy, Germany, watch out. And so now I'm saying, Britain, watch out. They're practically advertising what they're going to do. And why? Because, of course, Britain has to advertise, we're joining the fight. We're going to bomb you guys. So go ahead now and target our people. So anyhow, that's what seems to be. And then now it's confirmed in this headline, militant network behind Paris attack. Now, militant network, again, if it's a network, where's the communications? Why can't we, why isn't any of the eavesdropping equipment that they've been scaring Americans about for years, that they can listen to every cell phone call and all this kind of stuff? And yet we can't get a leg up on this militant network. And to the point where now they have to give us this idea that, well, okay, the San Bernardino shootings, this was a suddenly radicalized Muslim, but yet now we're going to pull ties into the people that he knew in the Middle East, and he went over there, and apparently he made some connections, although the FBI says that they were very loose connections. So, we don't know what any of this means. I say it all means Hollywood, Hollywood, Hollywood. And if you believe a word of what they say, then you're just being driven about like the wind on the seas. We went over Iran lying about its nuclear program. Here's one after that. Says IS child soldiers kill captives in gruesome video. The Islamic State group on Thursday posted online a gruesome video showing 6 of its child soldiers killing Syrian security forces held captive by the jihadists. And this is occasioned again by a picture of perfectly clean black uniforms, half a dozen of them or so, driving around in a truck. Perfect. The black flag looks like it was just brought out of the printer's shop. There's not even dust on it. They're just holding their machine guns in the air, riding in the back of a truck. That's the picture we get of this fighting force ISIS that never even gets dirty. Here's kind of a scary one. U.S. arms makers strain to meet demand as Mideast conflicts rage. Isn't that rough on the poor U.S. arms makers? They can't even keep up with the weapons. Top U.S. arms makers are straining to meet surging demand for precision missiles and other weapons being used in the U.S.-led bombings. So, again, I mean, how many missiles? They can't even keep up precision missiles. And again, where's our precision video of what these precision missiles are hitting? Why are these people still driving around in their perfectly clean uniforms, in perfectly clean trucks out in the open, walking down, perfectly open streets? And we've got precision missiles, but we just can't get a bead on these guys. And yet we're spending so many of these missiles. This is what I think, Dad, is the real insight, is they're soaking the American public right now. All of our money that might be going to, building infrastructure in our country, paying teachers, giving students back, the benefits we used to have when I went to school, like decent equipment in schools, decent, whatever, field trips to teach us things, libraries, maybe with books and things like that. No, we can't have any of that anymore. Because, of course, we got wars to fight against phantom enemies. And to do that, we need to spend, how much are these precision missiles that the U.S. arms makers are straining to meet surging demand? I mean, I guess it's a great time to own stock in U.S. arms makers, right? Like Raytheon and such people, Halliburton and all these companies. I guess their board of directors are just making hundreds of millions of dollars, like, is historically known. Just read that this goes all the way back to, at least in our culture and my understanding of modern history, Smedley Butler's War is a Racket from the time of World War One. I mean, that's a book every American should have to read from the point that they can read to get an idea of who runs these wars and for what reason and what the real cost to human life and even the earth that we're so concerned about climate change. But there's people out there that can tell you what's in these weapons, even the bullets, and what that's doing to the earth itself, and how much we should be trying not to be dumping all these weapons in the world, but instead we're firing them by the thousands at targets that no one seems to be able to disclose to us, so that we might feel some sort of confidence that spending all this money and spending these thousands of weapons polluting the earth and killing people is having some effect. But of course, for a year, we're told it's literally had no effect. Now we seem to be having some effect, and yet I say, my prediction, Dad, if that's the right word, is that effect is going to be to bring about more terrorism, more false flag events in the West. We got another headline here: China to build Navy base in Djibouti. China is to build its first naval base in, I don't know how to pronounce that, Djibouti, the foreign minister said on Friday. The latest sign of China's growing international security. So again, this is, China, the same ones who, as I've been trying to point out, we were told, and all these alternative media wants to tell us how the BRICS nation and the BRICS economy, and it's going to bust the U.S. economy and create a new financial system. And then on the other side of the coin, we're shown how China's absolutely broke. Their stock market is just a bunch of hot air like ours. They've had to sell all the, they're having to buy their own paper to keep the illusion that they have some sort of strength. And yet, well, I guess they got money to build a brand new Navy base. Why? Who's pulling these strings? Go back to what I've been saying, Dad, for weeks and weeks about, the central bankers. Go look at what Professor Quigley was saying in 1966 about the cabal of bankers that run the world and are the ones that are steering the world into their preordained game plan or destiny, where they own all the resources and they have say over all the sovereign nations and all the people that live in them. Okay, so I say that the same people that have been in charge of China for 100 years, since they threw the emperor out and started destroying that oldest, one of the oldest empires in the world, 5,000 years old when we destroyed it, and then brought General Mao in, the same bankers that funded the Bolshevik Revolution, that coincidentally fits into the pattern of these three world wars that were supposed to start disrupting the spiritual and religious life of these nations and creating a secular, atheistic set of nations that could be brought against the quote unquote Christian nations in the final World War. Anyway, that all just seems to fit a little bit too neatly. So please go back and listen to what we've been saying the last few weeks as we've covered a lot of this. I'm trying to just go through a lot of these headlines today so that people might be able to get the insight as how they fit into this scheme the way I'm imagining it. So now China now has the money to build its first naval base, brand new Navy base, because that's what China needs to do since they don't have any money and their system's completely broke, is they're building a Navy base. Next article. Prime Minister says Turkey cannot be brought to its knees by Russia. Turkey's Prime Minister struck a defiant tone Friday in his nation's growing spat with Russia, declaring that his country cannot be brought to its knees by Russian economic sanctions imposed in response to Turkey's downing of a Russian plane. So I say this is all just part of our long-term, or what I guess long-term in the sense that it's not going to come about this year or next year, but we're sowing the seeds of the NATO-Russia response that will need to be made as these two countries come to war with each other at some point. This is kind of a scary headline. France issues guide to surviving terrorist attack. So apparently they're not expecting terrorist attacks to stop, are they? France's government published a guide on Friday on how to survive a terrorist attack, coupled with a warning from the Prime Minister that people must learn to live with the risk. So, interesting. Not a warning against Islamic State that, wait till you see what we do to you. Let's get the French together like the Foreign Legion again and march through these places and take these people out. No, let's just learn to live with the risk that there's going to be more terrorist attacks. And I say this is all because it's exactly what you're going to have. That's why they're telling you. In fact, one of the other headlines this week that I found interesting, I read it and it just made me want to throw up. But the headline is, "The Canadian Model Fighting ISIS in Syria Tells U.S. What It's Like to Be on the Front Line." Hannah Bowman has been fighting ISIS in Syria on and off for most of 2015, and she hasn't been impressed. Okay, so this, and I'm sure she's tough. Being a model doesn't mean you're not tough. So this woman, who's a Canadian model, has been over there fighting ISIS, it says, on and off. And when you read the article, most of the time she wasn't anywhere near front lines. A couple of times she was in a firefight with the bullets whizzing past her. But what she says is they were running scared like babies. They were running like children from the fight. And so she's not impressed with how tough they are. But apparently everybody else seems to be so impressed that we got to put on the New York Times front page Muslim killers. And, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. So this girl's not impressed, but the rest of the world can't seem to do anything to stay away from them. Some more of these headlines. Firebomb attack at small nightclub in Cairo. Firebomb attack on a small nightclub in Cairo early Friday killed 16 people and wounded 3 others, authorities said. This is interesting since I'm in Hungary right now. Paris attack suspect recruited team in Hungary. One of the suspected ringleaders of last month's Paris attacks, Salah Absalam, traveled to Hungary where he recruited a team from unregistered migrants passing through, senior Hungarian government officials said. So this plays into the whole role of these scaring us with these migrants. So someone came here and recruited the team. So, if you recruited them from unregistered migrants, were these migrants already battle toughened um, Islamic jihadists? Or were these just poor people trying to escape the war in Syria? I haven't read the whole article. There's so many headlines. I'm just going over some of the headlines, Dad. But, uh, you know, I find inconsistencies in the way they report this stuff. A mastermind, first of all, the guy was presented to us as a mastermind behind the Paris attacks. And remember, they were able to hit 7 targets at once. They had people willing to blow themselves up and, able to get all this equipment into position and pull off these attacks and terrorize one of the most, I would assume, heavily guarded cities in Europe. So are these the kind of people you come into a place like Hungary where you got these migrants, and it's kind of funny because Hungary has so few migrants. I mean, they put razor wire up at the borders. It's a big deal here how they even have camps at the border where they're keeping migrants so that they can't actually get into Hungary. I think that'd be hard to go get them from these camps. So it strikes me as odd. Where do you find them? I mean, I've been walking around the city for a month, and I haven't seen anything like. I've seen one Syrian restaurant, in a really nice part of downtown Budapest. I'm wondering, where are all these migrants that you would recruit them? Because in Hungary, they're being kept at the border, quite under military force. So none of it adds up to me, except to possibly put Hungary and they're using Hungary. I've been saying that for months. This prime minister here claiming that he's doing the Christian thing by keeping the migrants out, claiming that he's one of the mouthpieces they've used to talk about the war on Europe, the army of people flooding into Europe, the intention to change the face of Europe and ruin their Christian heritage and turn it Muslim. All of this propaganda, wag the dog BS. And I've been here now for a month. And as I say, from what I know from the people I know here, Hungary's one of the countries that's holding that hard line and not allowing migrants in at all. They've razor wired half their borders where these people might come in. They've got military out there. They built a couple of camps, from what I understand, so that the migrants that don't have anywhere else to go can at least be confined. So they're not letting them into their country. So I'm just wondering where, they recruited this team in Hungary. And not to mention, Hungary's only got, Budapest is a big city, but the whole rest of the country is quite country, little country towns with farms and vineyards and such. It's not the kind of place that you find a band of militants hanging out undetected. So I'm just unsure where these people are coming from. Here's part of this idea of turning the tide on ISIS, I believe, without or at least right now increasing their need to be more dramatic and desperate. Okay, so one of these articles headline says, hard hit by bombings, IS is turning to child soldiers. The Islamic State group is increasingly filling its rank with child soldiers to replace thousands of its fighters killed in U.S.-led coalition airstrikes, a U.S. military spokesman said Friday. So interesting, we're killing thousands of the fighters, but I don't see any. The only pictures they ever show us, of course, are of these, people marching in their perfectly clean uniforms. So we're killing thousands of them. We know from other articles that it said from a couple of months ago, ISIS had to put electronic fences around these cities where they have strongholds because They're trying to keep the moderate Muslims from running away from this absurdity that they're trying to sell as a religious movement. And so, I feel like we're always getting these both sides of the of this this duplicitous story that doesn't add up. If they're so powerful, wouldn't their power reside in the fact that Muslims can't wait to join? Wouldn't that scare you if you knew in the West that every Muslim can't wait to join because everybody sees this as the true caliphate of Allah, that this is the time, these are the people, this is what you have to do is join these people. I mean, if that was happening, you'd be, instead of seeing millions fleeing, you'd be seeing, at least hundreds of thousands joining, wouldn't you? But instead, because we claim to have killed thousands, they're having to fill the ranks with child soldiers. So that sounds kind of desperate to me. And that desperation, I'm afraid, if and again, it shows another picture. It almost looks like the same picture, riding around in the truck, 10 guys raising their rifles, one flag, everybody in perfectly clean uniforms. So I'm afraid that if any of this was real, that would be quite a good sign to the allies against ISIS, that they were being weakened to the point of having to recruit child soldiers. But I say that's only going to make the desperation come out in more false flag terrorism. This one's interesting, Dad, to us who's waiting for this quote-unquote peace process. Trump says Mideast peace rests with Israel. Donald Trump said that if he's elected president, he'll know within 6 months whether he can achieve an elusive peace accord between Israelis and Palestinians, one of the world's most vexing challenges. So yeah, Jimmy Carter couldn't do it, right? Reagan couldn't do it if he even tried. Bill Clinton with the Y Accords. All of these, the roadmap to peace, as we talked about 15 years ago, nothing's been able to bridge this gap. But sure, Donald Trump, he'll do it. Why not? I mean, he's a real sort of Gandhi kind of character that could inspire people, isn't he? So it just makes me want to throw up to see all this stuff. But I find it's interesting that that's in the headline, the whole Israeli-Palestinian deal, because, of course, that's the peace that this little horn king is going to achieve. This is the great things that he's speaking. This is the reconciliation that he's going to bring, that the 144,000 are going to preach against. And the last two witnesses, and why they're going to be hated by the world, in my opinion. I don't know what other context you could fit these prophecies and world events into, but that's the way I see it, Dad, is that this white horse that's given a crown and goes forth conquering, and is going to conquer ISIS, and is going to allow the Jews to rebuild the temple on Temple Mount, and is going to say, hey, let's, we can reconcile all this. We can all be friends. We can all work together. And Israel is going to, for their part of it, make some sort of peace with the Palestinians, I believe. That's all going to be part of this. And that's what the world's going to be so thrilled about. Oh, look at that. Finally, and now the world is on its road to better times, which for 3.5 years, the 144,000 are going to be telling the Jews, hey, this isn't real. This is going to backfire. And the two witnesses are going to be saying that this isn't real and this is going to backfire. And apparently, since they're able to shut up the heavens and all sorts of things, it's going to be impossible to ignore them. And that's why they're going to be so hated by the world, that when they're finally killed, the world's going to send gifts to one another, that finally they've gotten these religious radicals out of the way and everybody can live in peace. Anyway, that's the way I see that coming, Dad. Turkey row leaves Russia stuck with abandoned gas pipes worth billions. Gas pipes worth 1.8 billion euros, almost $2 billion, are to be left stranded on the shores of the Black Sea. So again, another stressful link in the chain between Russia and Turkey. 4 Palestinians killed after attacking Israeli soldiers. So there's no relief there. French aircraft carrier to move to Gulf in a few days, says Hollande. Deploying ground combat forces, hostile act, says Iraqi Prime Minister. Iraq considers any country sending ground combat forces into his territory a hostile act and has not requested such a deployment. So again, you got the seeds of catastrophe back in being sown in Iraq. This is, I find, part of the to wind it up, Dad, back on the San Bernardino thing. Here's another article title: California shooter posted Facebook pledge to ISIS before attack. The woman who helped her husband kill 14 people at holiday party in California praised the leader of the Islamic State group in a Facebook post just minutes into the attack. I mean, does that sound, really? Minutes into the attack. I mean, I don't even understand that. It should have at least said minutes before the attack. While they were shooting, she had time to make a Facebook post. That all just sounds like Sandy hoax to me. And okay, one more. IS oil smuggling to Turkey insignificant. The amount of oil smuggled into Turkey from areas of Syria controlled by the Islamic State is economically insignificant, the United States said Friday after Moscow accused Ankara of profiting from the trade. So weren't we told about, not long ago, didn't they double their money from that was a significant part of their funding, which apparently is, paying for all this low-tech equipment that they're able to use to terrorize the world. But now that Russia's accused NATO ally Turkey of profiting from it, the U.S. is saying, it's not even much money after all. So anyway, Dad, I find this week's mouthpieces bringing us more and more absurd wag the dog reality. And I encourage those that are listening to us to please listen to some of the stuff we've done in the past to catch up with the context, that you might have a clearer picture of what's going on. And anyway, Dad, thanks for having me on the show. Hopefully next week we'll be able to do the show together from California.
Well, thank you, Tony. That was another really very, very interesting interpretation of what's going on from the news this week. And folks, I want you to know that all of this is just exactly as it's happening. We have been reporting on this now for many, many years. I believe our broadcast began in 2004. We started on the air in 1996. And we have watched this every day, recording this and making sure that we understand, because we were interested in finding out whether or not this prophecy of Daniel is coming true and how in the world it could ever come to the things that this prophecy was proclaiming. And yet, over all these years, we have actually seen it come to pass. Well, this is very credible information, and one of the things you might think about doing is supporting this work so that it doesn't stop, so that it keeps coming to you. And because this is a storehouse of God's Word, we don't charge anything for anything. All of our books are free. All of our programming is free. But the Lord said you give to the storehouse where you get your meat, so that meat's available to all of those who come seeking it 24/7. And that's just the way we have it set up. And you do that with frankincense. The offering you make to keep this ministry going is done with frankincense, because frankincense is what God required In the tabernacle in the wilderness, when you gave to that storehouse, you did it with hilarity and joy, and frankincense represents hilarity and joy. You know what you're doing and you're joyful about it. And God promises to pour a blessing down on you that you can't contain when you do it that way, when you do it His way. So if this is the storehouse where you get your meat, then stand up and cheer loudly, because it's offering time. Just click on the offering button that says frankincense offering right up in the corner on the heading on BroSal.org there on YouTube. Until we see you again next week, for Tony, I'm Brother Sal. We want you to have a great day in Christ. Thank you.